From University of Alberta Alumni Relations, it's What the Job. I'm Matt Ray.
The other piece that I love to tell students all the time, and I don't think we tell this enough to each other in society, is that they're worth it. That you're worth it. I mean, we're all great in our own way, and you're worth it, and it's okay not to know what you're going to be great at, but there's something you're great at, and find that passion and hold on to it.
My guest this episode is Jimmy Quinlan. Jimmy is a high school math teacher, but he's best known for his long career in pro-lacrosse. He played 8 seasons with the Edmonton Rush and had his number retired at Rexall Place in 2013. I talked to Jimmy about what he learned from working odd jobs, how being a professional athlete influences his teaching, and why failure can sometimes be a good thing. What the Job is made possible with the support of our affinity partner, TD Insurance. Did you know that through the TD Insurance Mellish Monix program, University of Alberta alumni are entitled to preferred rates on car, home, condo, and renters insurance? Save even more by bundling your car and home insurance. To learn more about how you can save, please visit tdinsurance.com/UAlberta alumni. So, what's your name and what's your job?
My name is Jimmy Quinlan, and I am a junior high/high school teacher.
And you teach math.
Correct. I teach mathematics 9, as well as phys ed from grade 7 to 12 at Vimy Ridge Academy.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the path of how you got there, because you have quite a winding career. You played professional lacrosse for quite a while?
Yes. My path to where I ended up today is one that is entertaining, to say the least. But yeah, I did play some professional lacrosse. I was fortunate enough to have a career that spanned, I believe, 9 years, if my memory serves me correct, if I haven't been hit in the head too many times. And then I was fortunate enough to coach for 5 years at the professional level.
And then you went straight from there into being a teacher, pretty much, coaching, teaching.
Well, so basically the league I played in was the National Lacrosse League, and for fans of sports in Edmonton, you may recall the Edmonton Rush. So the way that league works is it's primarily played on the weekend. So I actually, in 2007, began my teaching career while I was playing. So my week looked like Monday to Friday or Monday to Thursday I was teaching in the classroom, and then I'd be hopping on a plane and flying to various cities throughout North America to play on the weekend, and then I would be back Monday in the classroom teaching again. So
how did you balance that? Because I'm assuming you have to train, you have to practice, you have to stay in shape for playing, and also you have to be sharp for the classroom. How did you do both?
Well, my time at the university really prepared me for that. I was fortunate enough that I spent my first few years in the league while going to university, so I had to balance kind of a workload already once I became a teacher. Again, it was just kind of prioritizing what was needing to be done and what I felt mattered in my life. So, there wasn't probably a lot of weekends where I went out with my friends, or even weeknights for that matter. The day was spent teaching, the evening was spent training, and then you'd be right back at it. And then that was kind of the weekend. So I think it was something I still love to this day, and it was easy to do.
I guess if you want to do it.
Well, easy in the sense that I enjoyed doing what I was doing. In terms of balancing, it wasn't easy, and there was, some weeks that were rougher than others. But again, I was fortunate in that I had a lot of supports, both family-wise and at work, that allowed me to do it.
What are some of the things that people might not know about playing sports at that high level?
Well, I think the one thing that a lot of times is overlooked, and you see it a lot of times when athletes transition from the university or college level to a professional level, is that a lot of it falls on the individual. So there's no longer team lifting sessions or team training sessions, and it falls a little bit more on the individual to make sure they're getting their work in. And so it does take some discipline and some balance. But at the end of the day, when you love it, it's not that, hard of a thing to do.
When were you thinking to yourself, I want to play at the highest levels of lacrosse?
Well, I was probably in high school, probably grade 11, 12, I kind of started to compete in some national tournaments and have some good team success as well as individual success. And then I was fortunate. There was a couple of kids, so to speak, that were a little bit older than me that had went off and had success that I kind of was able to follow in their footsteps. And it wasn't always easy. I didn't always make the teams. I was drafted in 2002 to the Calgary Roughnecks. And I got cut that year, and I didn't actually make the league till 2005. So things weren't always good. Things weren't always easy. But again, I knew that if I kind of kept working at it, it wasn't necessarily whether I made it or not. It was the fact that I was actually going to put in an effort and try. And I was fortunate enough to make it. So I wasn't always the best. And I think those characteristics that I learned along the way of the resiliency and just controlling what you can control. I think you hear that a lot nowadays in sports where they talk about trusting the process and the outcome will take care of itself. I didn't know it at the time, but I was learning those things. And, now to this day, I look outside, it's minus 30. I don't even worry about it because I got no control over it. And so I think that's one of the things I've learned along the way is that you'll be okay. The world will continue. And it's okay to not know what you want to do. And it's okay to fail.
When did you decide that you weren't going to play lacrosse anymore professionally?
There's a humbling experience. I went from being kind of like a role player when I started in Toronto. We came to Edmonton with their expansion team in 2006. I was kind of one of the focal point players for about the first 5 years, and then I went from offense, which is the kind of the glory position from scoring the goals, to transition, to eventually defense, to eventually they moved me out. So it was probably my 10th year. I actually got a phone call from the coach, and I said how excited I was for camp, and his reaction on the other end of the phone was, "We don't really think we have a position for you." And that was probably one of the hardest punches I've ever taken to the gut, because I had done everything and anything to prepare. And you know what? I look back on it and I'm happy I put the work in. And again, he's one of the men in the world I look up to the most, because he was honest with me, and it was hard honesty, but he was honest with me, and he said, "Don't worry, I think we'll find something for you if you're interested in sticking around." And I did have the opportunity to go play for some other teams, but Edmonton had been so good to me, and it was home, and I liked where I was. I took a chance on what he was saying, and a few days later, the defensive coach had another child and was stepping down, and so he asked me to take that position. So again, for those people who are wondering why things happen, I think there's a reason. Sometimes you don't know it at the time, but eventually you'll find it, and there'll be some meaning to it. So I was lucky. So at the time, I didn't like it, but when I look back on it, I think I couldn't have scripted a better way for my career to go.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you've learned playing lacrosse that you apply to your life or your job right now. And it seems like one thing that you've learned is that failure is a good thing and you should embrace it. How would you talk to someone who's afraid of failing, or people who hold back because they're scared of not being successful?
I would say to think about the greatness that could come from just even if you succeed. I think so many times we focus on the negative. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Resilient. It's fitting that we're talking about that right now. But it's a book, and the gentleman's it's an audio book. I'm not going to pretend here I read and read and read. I like to listen. It's better than the radio in my car.
We're pro listening here.
Yeah, so. We're pro listening. Yeah, so I'm listening to an audio book. It's Resilient, and he's talking about your body and your mind remembers more negatives than positives, right? And so and we tend to focus on the negative. There's seldomly someone comes up to you and tells you about the great things that happen in their day. They tell you about the bad things that happen in your day. And so I kind of like to flip the script a little bit and try to find the positives that are going on. And so when you do get cut, like what can you take from it? What have you done well? And again, like I would tell somebody who's hesitant to try that, think about the greatness that could come from it, right? You're not getting anything right now really by not putting forth an effort. And the other piece that I love to tell students all the time, and I don't think we tell this enough to each other in society, is that they're worth it. you're worth it. I mean, we're all great in our own way, and you're worth it, and it's okay not to know what you're going to be great at, but there's something you're great at, and find that passion and hold on to it.
As an aside, I had to write an article about called "How to Skate Like Connor McDavid," and I had to interview a whole bunch of phys ed people about the different things, and one of them was mindset. So I talked to a sports psychologist, and she was talking about how good athletes, because I was like, how do you get on the field of the ice when you're someone who is like smaller than everyone else, and everyone is out there is trying to hurt you.
Right.
How do you muster the courage? And she said that good athletes will see it as an opportunity, a challenge for them to rise to. They don't think strictly about the negatives. They're nervous and they can't avoid them, but they think, I'm ready for this challenge. Does that happen a lot?
Well, I think it does. As soon as I hear that story, the first thing that comes to mind is the book that I always read when I was kind of in a lull athletically. And it usually had nothing to do with the physical traits. It always had to do with the mind. It had to do with, and the book's called Mind Gym. And in the book, one of the most vivid stories I recall is the psychologist is talking about the golfer who steps up to the tee and there's water in front of him. And they sit there and they tell themselves, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water. And what they're doing is they're programming their brain to see the water. And then you wind up and you put the ball right in the middle of the water. And so if you can just change the way you see things and the way you view things, and a lot of times you might have to fake it at first, and we've all heard the saying, fake it to make it. But I think eventually if you just keep doing it, you start to view obstacles in a different way. You don't view them as they're insurmountable. You view them as something that you can surpass, and when you surpass, there's going to be a great feeling. So, in relation to the golfer, it's see the grass, and I've done it on the course, and the difference is, it's there. And so to try to get those individuals who are kind of stuck, who are worried about failure, think about the bright side.
Well, this is a work podcast, so I guess I should talk about your work history. And we talked a little bit before we started recording, and it's been quite eventful. You said you started in high school. You were sandblasting?
Yeah, I had sandblasted like summers of grade 10, 11, and 12. It's an interesting job. It's not fun in the sun when you got to put on a full suit and it was in the oil field work. But again, I learned a lot about myself in those moments. But yeah, so I would have done that in grades 10, 11, and 12, and then I carried it on once I graduated because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I didn't have too much pressure from my parents in terms of you need to do this or that. My grandfather, best piece of advice he ever gave me was, you'll do it when you're ready. And so I sandblasted, and that was kind of growing tiresome. So then I decided I would try my hat at radio and television at NAIT. So I actually applied to two I guess schools really there. I tried to the construction engineering and radio and arts. And the radio and arts was very difficult to get into, and I got rejected. And I got into construction engineering, and one was a 17-week program and one was a 16-week program. So I started the first week in construction engineering, writing my letters on the draft board, and then halfway through on about a Wednesday, I got a phone call saying I got accepted into radio arts. Someone had dropped out, and so you want to make a change. You want to change, and I had no clue whether I wanted to change. I didn't know whether I wanted to be in construction engineering, whether I wanted to be in radio. I didn't know. I knew one was harder to get into the other, so I thought maybe go that route. Plus, it was less labor intensive. I like to talk. I liked radio. I liked sports. I thought maybe there'd be an avenue there for me. So I went into radio, and I slowly started to realize while I was in there that I would have to probably give up my lacrosse, and I didn't again know what to do. So I finished it out, and then from there I never took a job in radio. I just continued playing lacrosse and started to do some other odds and end jobs while I was trying to figure some stuff out and continue trying to further my lacrosse career. And then it was about, I think, 2003 or 2, I applied to the university in the Faculty of Native Studies, and I got accepted. Again, the history of lacrosse is deep in the Native tradition, so I thought that might be something I wanted to do. And then once there, I switched into the Faculty of Education, and I wanted to be a phys ed major, and math minor, but I didn't have the grades to get into phys ed, believe it or not. It was lower than math, but I think that's because of how many people want to be in phys ed versus math. And so I switched. So I went to a math major and a phys ed minor, and I took, I always get made fun of from my family about how many years I took to get a 4-year degree, but I enjoyed every minute of it.
And then you worked while you were a student.
I did, yeah. I was actually the delivery driver and kind of connoisseur at Baseline Wine and Spirits, which still exists in Sherwood Park. So I actually really liked my time there, and there was a lot of good stories, and they were very supportive of my time while I went through university, and I think that's how employers should be.
What do you think? Because you've worked so many odd jobs, doing all kinds of things throughout, as you either playing lacrosse or going to school. It seems like you were constantly busy, so you had to always balance your time. But I'm also wondering what you learned from these odd jobs. Like, did you find that there were skills that transitioned between them, even if you hated the job?
Yeah, I do, and I thought for me it's fun to look back and to say I've tried all those things. You know, to have worked in a few different industries. Because I think you can have a better understanding of what someone's day-to-day life might be like. Through it all, I think the biggest thing I learned was that it's okay to not know what you want to do, and it's okay to change. I think it's okay to not know what you want to do, and I think it's okay to switch if you're doing something and it doesn't feel like it's right.
So just thinking about your radio, because you did radio, and then you said you never worked a day in radio.
Yeah.
Was that something that concerned you? I think some people, when they do a degree in something, especially something that seems to have a path to a specific job, they might think to themselves, I must do that job, or otherwise it's a bit of a sunk cost fallacy, but they'll be like, I spent all this time getting this degree, all this money getting this degree. If I don't do this job, I've failed.
Yeah, I never worked a day in radio. I mean, I've been on a lot of radio shows. I've done some phone-ins through my lacrosse. I always felt comfortable behind a microphone. But I never worked a day in radio, and people make, like my sisters and brothers they'll give me a hard time about it, but if I want to go back and work in radio, I can try to go back and work in radio. That's the way I see it. I don't think just because you have my wife has a degree in education and she's not using it right now. And I think that's great. I think you have every day for the rest of your life to work. Why be in a hurry to work, like the workforce? Like you can.
Conversely, we might say like your wife uses her ed degree all the time, but in a different capacity.
Yeah, and perfect. Yeah, she does, because she does. She works with people every day on a daily basis, teaching them how to use the computer or do a number of tasks that they are asking or searching out the skills for, and she's happy doing what she's doing. And so I think that idea of finding something you love and holding on to it is more important than using your degree because you went to school for 4 years. And I think I understand the other side of it. I understand the side of I've invested time, I've invested energy, and I've invested money. I think a lot of times though that when we get into that mindset, we're not thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about what other people will view us on. And we get caught up in something must be wrong. I liken it to the person who I see a counselor and people are like, oh, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, nothing's wrong with me. I want to get better. I want to be a better version of myself. So you can look at it as what's wrong with you, but I'm going to look at it as I want to become a better person, because if I can become a better person, I'm going to become a better father, and I'm able to better support my students in the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. It goes down the line. And so it's that idea of being okay with whatever it is you're doing.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. No, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's always, I think, also about, building skills. You talk about bettering yourself so you can be better at being a father or being a teacher. And I wonder, one thing I'm really interested in, so you're teaching now.
Yes.
So you have classes full of students you have to manage and watch them grow, and hopefully they improve and don't, they show up to class and whatever. But I'm wondering, like, when you think of your career as an athlete or any of those other jobs, how often do the lessons you learn there apply to the classroom?
Oh, every day. Every day I feel like I'm drawn on some sort of a sports quote or a sports analogy with my students. And I mean, I'm fortunate I teach at a school that's predominantly sports driven. But again, I think it's something that most students can relate to. And if they can't relate to that, then you try to find something they can relate to. But But for me, the idea of, controlling what you can control. I tell that to the students all the time. In sports, you can't control the refs, yet you see people expend energy and waste their time and efforts on them. And, why not focus on the things you can control? Why not focus on your attitude? Why not focus on your effort? Why not focus, on making sure that you're on time with the proper materials, those types of things, right? And so I try to instill that in the students in the sense that if I'm going for a job posting and I'm doing my interview, there's certain things I'm not going to be able to control. I'm not going to be able to control what questions they ask me. But we sit there and we spend time trying to decipher what are they going to ask me. And we sometimes get ourselves maybe in not necessarily the right mindset versus, okay, can I control what time I'm going to get there? Can I control, if I have a good sleep, if I eat something well, can I control if I get the exercise, if that's something I'd like the night before? And you can. And if you do all those things, I think what's going to happen is you'll walk into that interview in the right frame of mind and you'll be better for it.
I mean, and I think I also was thinking as you're talking about when you mentioned a golfer who sees just the water.
Yeah.
If the golfer just controls all the other things that they know that they control, don't think about that.
Right.
They go through the motions, right?
Right.
So you have to be strategic, I guess, about what you're planning and what you're thinking about and what you can control.
Yeah, exactly. I think, setting attainable goals, having a plan, those types of things are important. But I think the ability to adapt. And I think that's sometimes where we get kind of stuck.
I want to just talk a little bit about what the process was like for you getting your job as a math teacher. For people who are thinking about becoming a teacher, what's that process like?
The process can be actually quite lengthy and arduous. For me, it wasn't. I was fortunate because of my lacrosse background, and there was a sports academy school in Edmonton that at that time needed a lacrosse-specific teacher. So I was very fortunate in the sense that I got offered a position right out of university that went from a probationary position to a continuous position. But usually what teachers will end up having to do is they end up having to take, a temporary position, a leave, or, if they're lucky, they get a probationary position with one of the boards. And then from there, you're up for evaluation. And then if everything goes well, then you get recommended for continuous. And it can be quite a lengthy process. And one of the interesting pieces about it, and again, teachers can sometimes complain about it, that when you first start out, they kind of give you the dog's breakfast. You get a little bit of everything. And it makes it difficult. But again, I think it's how you view it. I was fortunate in the sense that I got a fairly decent schedule when I started, but if you can view those challenges as, when I come through on the other side, I'm going to be so much better for it. I think it'll make that time more enjoyable, but I was very lucky. I won't put it any other way, except I was very lucky that I came out and I had an expertise in lacrosse and there was a lacrosse position opened. My wife, on the other hand, she spent 8 or 9 years bouncing from a temporary to a probationary and vice versa, and never got a continuous contract. And so I can only imagine the stress that would have put and the weight that would have put on her, in the sense that what am I doing wrong and this and that. And again, I think if you get too fixated on some of that stuff, I think you lose the natural joy and excitement of the experience. And again, I don't know the easy answer to that. I don't know if there is an answer to that, but teaching can be a very fulfilling profession, but at the same time, it can be very hard to get your foot in the door.
For student athletes who are graduating, when they're applying for jobs, what sort of skills should they highlight from their athletics, if they're playing team sports, like lacrosse, for example, that people that are hiring might not think of, or that they might not think of as valuable skills for any job?
Well, I think there's a discipline to being an athlete, whether that be team or individual. Usually they have a very good ability to adapt, willingness to take on roles, willingness to put others, first, or willing to focus on a common goal. Being coachable. I don't think you get to a collegiate level if you're not coachable. So that ability to take information and digest it. Again, I think just the simple fact, there's very few, again, I mean, I watched the basketball players run up and down the court at Seville. Like, you got to work hard to play that sport. There's no coasting. So, I mean, right off the bat, you're going to get someone who's probably reliable and hardworking, who understands how the team dynamic works, just because that's what they've grown up to and that's what they're accustomed to. People who've been on a team, they understand that idea that, oh, I might have to be on call this week, and that's okay. And they're not going to complain about it. They're just going to see it as what they're used to.
I just think it's important that athletes realize when they're training, when they're doing their sports, that they are developing skills that they can apply to when they're applying for jobs or interviewing or any of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's interesting when you pose that question, because I myself, having coached and been around the sport, I don't ever tend to think of that. You just tend to, well, I'm just doing what I do, but you don't see the value in what you're doing. And so I think even just, I think one of the exercises you could do with athletes at any level is just to question them on what are some skills you're acquiring through sport.
All right, it's time for the lightning round, made possible with the support of our preferred car, home, condo, and renters insurance affinity partner, TD Insurance. So I'm just going to ask you some quick questions. What advice do you have for someone who feels like they're stuck in a career rut, or that they're in a career they don't like?
Change. I'll say this about that. If you can change, you will forever have everyone in the world's respect, because I think there's so many people out there that would love to change, but it's easy to stay where you are because it's comfortable, and the world sometimes is uncomfortable, so we might as well get used to it.
What would you be doing if you weren't a math teacher?
Stay-at-home dad.
If you had to pick one, what's the favorite thing about being a math teacher?
Connecting with people.
If you could go back in time and talk to yourself, maybe just after you finished at NAIT or at U of A, you can pick one. What would be the advice you'd give yourself?
Slow down and enjoy life.
In respect to your education, your career path, or maybe your experiences in athletics, is there anything you wish you had done that you didn't?
Played collegiate lacrosse in the United States.
Oh, really?
Really.
Did you have some schools you wanted to
I
go
had
to?
some schools, and I was lazy and never filled out the applications, and I thought that they would be knocking on my door more than they were. So I use that daily with the kids, that if you want something, you better go do it. And
then what was it like? Because they retired your number at Rexall.
Yes. Very weird. Very weird. People still, again, for me, I it's weird. I don't like to talk too much about myself. I don't think I was worthy, I guess, in the sense of having my number retired statistically. And but I can proudly say that, and this is kind of one of the things people have always told me, that it didn't matter what the score was or what the outcome of the game was going to be. You always knew that if there was one thing I was going to do, was put in an honest effort and give everything I had. And I can say I did that every single day. And if that's what got my number in the rafters, I think what a remarkable thing, because I think that's what we ask of people on a daily basis, but sometimes we don't reward it. So if I was rewarded on that, I can be happy with that.
Excellent. Well, I think you put an honest effort into this podcast. Lots of good advice, I think, for anyone who is listening today, especially people who played sports, but really anyone. A lot of good advice for me, I thought, as I listened. So thanks so much for agreeing to talk today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, that's our show. I'd like to thank Jimmy Quinlan for joining us to talk about his career journey. Next episode, my guest is alumna Wendy Wilton, who talks about workplace culture. And if you're looking for more career advice, or if you're looking to give career advice, why not try UAlberta Switchboard, a new online tool that connects you to your UAlberta community. Whether you're looking for a new job, a mentor in your field, or a volunteer experience to expand your resume, Switchboard has you covered. And best of all, it's free. Give it a try at uab.ca/sboard. That's uab.ca/sboard. Thanks for listening. For What the Job, I'm Matt Ray.